Welcome to CCW Digital's first, but certainly not last, online event of 2022, State of Contact Center Technology. When you're talking about an early year event, you always want to be focusing on the horizon. What's next? How are we going to use innovative thinking to overcome a combination of lingering and emerging challenges? And that is the heart of what technology is about. Because when technology works right, it isn't just a fun toy to play with. It's certainly not a list of new learning curves and instructions your team has to work with. It is a way to make solving problems easier so you and your team can focus on solving your customers' problems in a more productive, more valuable, more personalized way. And over the next 2 days, that's exactly what we're going to be focusing on. Now, before I pass it over to Brooke Lynch to kick off our first session, just a few notes on our event. First of all, there is a leaderboard point system in play for this program, which means when you attend sessions, when you access content, when you ask questions, you have the chance to earn points for our prize giveaway. Additionally, definitely take advantage of the chat, whether you're playing or not, because our speakers are thrilled to hear from you, thrilled to use their insights to answer your questions and make this the most personalized and productive online event possible. And finally, if you have any questions, make sure to access the support tab at the top of your screen where our friendly team is standing by to make sure you have the event experience that you absolutely need. Without further ado, let me pass it over to Brooke Lynch to kick off our analyst chat. And because last time we did one of these, she was rolling her eyes at all my crazy points, I've asked her not to go on camera, but she is going to be here to lead some great discussion anyway.
Yes, I wish that was true, but I am just having issues with my camera today, so you will just be hearing my voice. But I'm very excited to welcome you all to CCW Digital's State of Contact Center Technology Analyst Chat. I am joined by Brian Cantor, obviously, my fellow CCW Digital Analyst, and we are going to unpack some findings from our latest market study, which was focused on technology and innovation in the contact center. And with the State of Contact Center Technology event, we really wanted to take a moment to highlight the importance of innovation and celebrate the strides that companies have made in delivering tech-driven experiences that really excite customers in 2022. So at a time when expectations seem to be sky high, companies lean on technology to assist their frontline, support their customers, and improve experiences. And in this session, we're going to touch on how it helps companies achieve these realities and share common successes and challenges that we're seeing when it comes to contact center tech stacks. So we have some really interesting sessions lined up these next 2 days, and I hope to see you all join in. As Brian mentioned, we have that dedicated discussion section. So feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts. And we're going to make sure that we get to as many as we can today in this session. And yeah, with every session that you guys attend and every question that you ask, and even every content piece that you view in the resource hub, you're going to accumulate points, and your tally is going to be shown on that top right corner of your screen. And with each point that you accumulate, you will be put in the running to win a $100 Amazon gift card, which is very exciting. So make sure you guys play along throughout our sessions today and tomorrow. But to kick things off and really get started with, our discussion today, I want to touch on the top goals for contact center technology in 2022. And it's interesting, Brian, because in the market study, you guys touch on the fact that there is a difference between feeling prepared and being ecstatic about technology. And I think that's a really valid point because in the past 2 years, companies were seemingly catching up. They were placed in a difficult position and they were using technology as a lifeline. But now we're in a place where we can really be excited about technology again and choose solutions and tools that expand our abilities rather than act as that safety measure. So for my first question, I'd love to discuss how companies can really get excited about technology again. And Brian, can you share some of the key priorities and goals that you saw in that market study for 2022?
So it's somewhat ironic, right? Because obviously I wrote that passage in the market study. I completely agree with your point that companies really want to go from, okay, my technology is good enough to get the job done. My technology can support remote workers. My technology can allow for an omni-channel engagement to actually getting excited about the value we're offering. So when you think exciting, you probably think of all these amazing new features and this super complicated use of new developments like AI to do things that we never thought possible. And while, yes, there obviously is a little bit of focus on that, the reality is what companies are most excited about is finally securing technology that has accountability, that has a real purpose for their organization. So in a sense, what they're most excited about is getting back to the basics. And here's what I mean by that. The number one focus for technology investments this coming year is reducing operating costs and or boosting productivity. Other top priorities were reducing customer effort, reducing agent effort, leveraging real-time training and e-learning to improve performance, and improving access to and or use of customer and business data as well as knowledge. Now, none of those is we're going to suddenly create a virtual world where our customers can engage with us as if they're actually there. It's all stuff that really speaks to core business goals. Now, why is that so important and why is that so exciting? Well, first and foremost, this is why technology exists. It's there to make us more productive. And so naturally, when you have a goal to emphasize lower costs, make our agents and our team members more productive, improve the way we connect with our customers and empower our teams and make our managers more capable, that's obviously going to be extremely important. Now, another reason why this is such a worthwhile focus is this idea of buy-in. Every time I attend one of our in-person events, every time I, engage with members of our community, I constantly hear the question, how do I get executives as excited about this technology as I am? And in part, the reason for this is we as a customer contact community, we treat the customer experience oftentimes as an end. If we can say that we're making our customers happier, that we're making our employees happier, that is enough to get excited about. That is enough to pursue technology over. But we know that sometimes communicating that message, especially when you don't have immediate metrics to point to, doesn't always resonate with the C-level the way we want it to. And so there's always that question of what can we do to show proof that this technology is worth supporting? Well, when we can have a tangible connection to lower long-term costs, when we can show real proof that our agents will work better, that is a strong way to make the case. And that goes for anything from AI technology to analytics technology to stronger dashboards or stronger training modules. Anything you can do to show that, hey, we're spending this much money and our agents are only getting this amount done. Why don't we invest in this system? The cost will go down, the output will go up. That's going to be a message that resonates with anyone, no matter how much they care about the soft and warm heartiness of the customer experience, or if they're just business people, that message is going to resonate with them. Now, as I mentioned, customer and agent effort are both priorities. And Brooke, I know we plan to explore this a little bit further in an upcoming question, but certainly I don't think there's anyone out there who would be surprised that we want to make life easier for those end users. Now, real-time training and e-learning is absolutely essential in today's environment, especially, right? Now, I'm not going to say that everyone's figured this out completely. I'm not going to say that I've seen too many amazing examples of success here, but we all do know that companies are kind of set with where they are when it comes to the pure engagement side of remote workers. They have their Zoom happy hours. They have their daily team or Slack chats. Again, not saying it's perfect, but a lot of companies have reached a point of comfort where they're no longer looking for all these crazy innovative ways to collaborate in a remote world. But what they are absolutely looking to do is improve the caliber of training, improve the caliber of development, ensuring that employees feel as if they're part of the team. And with each passing day, they become a better part of that team and a more knowledgeable representative for the brand. Now, this is an area where it is so important right now, especially as we hear talk of we want to hire more remote workers, or we want to hire gig workers who don't have any exposure to the brand without really having any background where they can fall back on, you know what, this wasn't super clear in the script, but at least I know from my experience how to answer that question. Gig workers don't have that luxury. They're new to the dance. And so for them, you absolutely have to make sure that you have easy, personalized, automatic, accessible training, and e-learning investments certainly allow for that. And then finally, data in many cases solves the same purpose, right? We know that when we can put real-time insights about performance and customer sentiment and call needs in front of those agents, they're going to be more successful. But also generationally, we constantly hear that one of the trends among younger generations who are increasingly coming to prominence in the workforce is that they want to know what their work is doing. They want to have that sense of why and that sense of purpose. And when you can give them visibility into the real impact of the conversations they're having, of the tasks they're doing through transparent data, that is absolutely going to be a valuable example of technology. And so certainly it's not surprising that a lot of companies are eager to make that happen.
Yeah, you make some really valid points. And I like how you started off the discussion by saying that, we're not working to create a fully virtual world. We're really trying to use technology in a way that really helps us be more human and helps us really, boost productivity in a meaningful way and really support our agents in delivering better experiences. So I like how you kind of led that. And I think we're going to see that throughout this event as well. I want to ask our attendees a question. I know you guys have all introduced yourselves, so welcome. But we really want to, engage in the chat as well. So my question is, what are the leading challenges or opportunities that are really working to, lead your technology decisions in 2022. So feel free to enter that in the chat, and we will share some of your responses as well. But my next question challenges the idea of customer centricity. So to be a customer-centric brand, there must be a universal focus on the customer experience throughout every thread of your organization. And companies who are truly customer-centric, they listen to not only their customers, but their employees to really establish those better experiences. Yet when we ask customer contact executives, 59% stated that users, which included customers and frontline agents, don't have enough of a voice in their company's technology decisions. So, Brian, what's going on there?
Yeah. So, on the one hand, right, it wouldn't be surprising to see, companies perhaps at times overstating how customer centric they are. We know we've seen all kinds of variations of that stat where when you ask a company how well they're doing and then you ask a customer how well they're doing, generally the company is more optimistic. They're more self-congratulatory. And that's human nature, right? That's no fault of any company. Of course, you want to think you're doing better. And especially in our community where we know that everyone is working so hard, right? We've been committed to becoming more customer centric, becoming more agent centric for so long. And I know a lot of companies out there that work tirelessly to make it happen. They don't always have the results, but when you put that much effort in, it's hard to totally act as if you're falling short. And so I get where the disconnect might come from a data standpoint, but there actually were some interesting contradictions within the survey itself. So, on the one hand, like you said, not only are companies saying that they're not listening to their employees and customers the way they should, but they actually feel like despite that, they're doing really well. So the majority of companies actually said that even though we're not listening enough to our frontline, our technology does make life easier for our agents and does make experiences more simple for our customers. And they're happy about that. And while I'm not going to deny that, yes, we have made some strides in some areas over the past few years, I'm going to challenge whether we've actually done enough. And that's not just me in my gut saying we can do better. That's actually the very same people who filled out this survey identified a major weakness. And here's one of them. Nearly 91% of companies, that's 9-1, say that agents typically have to access multiple screens or systems when solving even routine customer issues. 91% basically means almost every agent for almost every interaction has to look across multiple interfaces just to solve it. Now, when we're talking about an era where we know that efficiency is so important, an era where we know that agent effort actually has a bigger impact on retention and satisfaction than cool, fun culture stuff like pizza parties and happy hours. And we're making 91% of our employees look across multiple screens just to solve a problem. Clearly, we're not doing enough. Clearly, technology is not the ally it needs to be, but instead is often a hindrance to a great experience. And again, when you bring a stat saying that 59% of companies are not listening enough to their front line when making these decisions, it's surprising that people feel that they're doing pretty well. It's certainly not surprising that they're striking out in this regard. And so certainly what we need to do moving forward is make sure that we amplify the voice of our customers and our employees. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? Certainly, you need to be looking hard at your data to understand how exactly your customer is looking to engage. And is this fancy new channel or cool new technology, is it actually supporting how they want to engage? Or is it something that just seemed really cool in the boardroom, but is actually going to be a bit of a nuisance for your customers? The same thing goes for your employees, right? I mean, we've all been in companies where our team installed a fancy new CRM system or a new phone interface. And on paper, it seemed like it was going to save us so much time. But if we didn't arm our employees with the right context, the right training, and if we didn't think about where their real pain points were, it ended up having a negative effect because it was something new to learn. And it took a long time before we could actually see the efficiency benefits, which one, not only slows things down, but also makes the agent feel a little disrespected or ignored. And they don't feel as excited about this technology that is supposed to be for them above all else. Now, another thing that's actually happening, and this was a big news story recently, is the idea of giving the people who make technology decisions or the people who actually make the technology itself access to the front line so they can see what's really going on with customer experiences, with employee experiences. So there was a big DoorDash story recently. For those unfamiliar, there was talk about DoorDash reviving its program where multiple team members, including engineers, would actually take a delivery or interact with a customer out in the field. And so they would really see what happens on the front line. And they would get a front row seat to how all this technology and all these experiences they're designing are actually manifesting in real life. Now, for the sake of this argument, I certainly understand why DoorDash may be a tricky example, right? Because on the one hand, yes, it's a perfect example of a hyper-competitive space where you want to have the best technology and the best experience possible. So it makes a lot of sense to make sure everyone in the company understands what's going on. But yes, whenever you talk about deliveries and face-to-face interactions in today's world, with the pandemic, there's obviously going to be some reservations. So I don't want to get into a huge debate about whether it makes sense for a particular company to do out in the field deliveries right now or to interface with people directly right now. But I think what we want to do, the spirit of what they're doing, I don't see how anyone can disagree with the merit here, right? We have long known that engineers design as engineers. They know what they know. They're brilliant. They know how to code. They know how to develop. They know how to look at data and do things. But at the end of the day, if they're not the ones using the technology, they may have a clouded assessment of whether their technology is helpful or not. And so by putting them on the front line so they can see how what they're designing is being used, it gives them better context for making improvement moving forward. It lets them know the types of things that seemed genius behind the scenes, but actually create a lot of friction on the front line. And so this is something when we used to do our site tours of Zappos out at our CCW Vegas event, they would often talk about how in their training process, everyone, all the way up to high-level executives, spends time fielding customer service calls to really understand who their customers are, what their concerns are, and what the experience is like. And that concept, regardless of whether they're out in the field, whether they're answering a call, whether they're just testing your website, that concept is pretty irrefutably correct. That everyone in your business, those making technology decisions, those coding, those designing products, those hiring employees, have to know what employee and customer experiences are like in order to give that firsthand perspective of what the priorities need to be when we're designing technology and what are things that are perhaps nice features, but are not going to have the anticipated effect and may even make things worse. And so this notion of really getting frontline exposure for all your team is so critical right now. And I would recommend everyone out there, assuming their organization supports it to some degree and has some degree of customer facing activity, should do something to figure out how, in again, a manner mindful of who your employees are, mindful of what the limitations might be from a societal standpoint right now, figuring out a way to get them that exposure so they can see how what they're designing is impacting real life.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting program. And I want to shout out one of our attendees, Devin Poole. He said, there's a major disconnect between management and the actual employee workflow. And I agree. And I think programs like these, allow management and, people in different positions to actually see the day-to-day workflow of different employees so they can actually get a better understanding of how the technology works, how they can improve it, and how they can better the customer experience as well. But I do think it's interesting to mention, I just wrote an article about this, so you guys can check it out on CCW Digital, But there was also a little bit of backlash from employees who actually were expected to do deliveries, saying that it wasn't in their job description, and they were seemingly bothered by having this new responsibility, which I think is, it kind of speaks to that idea of customer centricity. We really need to make sure our employees throughout the organization are passionate about the customer experience and passionate about creating a better experience and better workflows as well.
Yeah, and I love that point, Brooke, because it really speaks to a breakdown in culture. One, sorry, if you think your job is just like your job description that was on LinkedIn when you applied for it, and not to collaborate with your team to create a better product, a better company, a better culture, then you're not someone that really deserves to be rising up in leadership. I'm sorry if I know people might disagree with that, but the reality is that the number one priority is, did your work contribute positively to the overall objective of the team? And if you're not designing technology that leads to a better customer experience, better agent experience, or has some demonstrable impact on the front line, then I argue that you haven't been successful, even if you're the most brilliant coder or the most charismatic executive in the world. You have to have that exposure there. Two, this is something that, even without taking into account other departments, we see so often, even in the contact center, right? We have this notion that, who is my boss? Is my boss the guy who signs my paychecks, the guy who determines if I get a promotion, or is it the customer? And too many people, yes, obviously, literally it's the former, but if you don't, from a practical standpoint, think about day to day, it being the latter, then there's a breakdown in your culture. And the example I give is, let's say that you have to reject a customer's return over policy. And when you do so, the customer gets really angry. They say they're never doing business with you again, and you hang up. Are you happy? Do you think your boss is going to give you a pat on the back because you read the policy correctly? Or do you think your boss is going to chastise you for losing that customer's trust? If it's the former, you have a bad culture. If it's the latter, that's where customer centricity comes from, that you should always believe that your company is behind you in your effort to do better for your customers. And so we need to make sure that we have a culture where people see that, yes, sometimes I will have to deviate a little bit from what I thought my job was going to be, or what I thought the policy said, because customer demands evolve as well. And if we're going to be customer centric, we have to evolve with them.
Yeah, I want to shout out again one of our attendees, because I think it will lead us well into the next question. Richard Bernstein said that a challenge that he's facing is agent turnover and the inability to get enough agents hired. He's looking to use AI and self-service to reduce reliance on agents when possible, while keeping the member experience in mind.
Brooke, did you slip him it sounds like you slipped him the question list before this, because that is a perfect transition.
I know, I agree. So in my next question, if you've tuned into any of our previous events, if you've read any of our special reports, you've heard that concept of AI being used for simple tasks so humans can focus on the complex ones. It's not revolutionary, but it's important. It's a theme that you're going to see being discussed throughout this event as well. And it's one of the reasons that technology is so critical to the contact center. So Brian, can you share some of the ways that companies plan to prepare for this reality? How are they going to utilize the extra focus and attention once they can finally remove those redundant, unnecessary tasks?
Yeah, so I think I've always referred to this as be careful what you wish for, right? It's like we love that talking point that our agents hate boring work, that it's a waste of their time, that we're not getting the full value out of them. But what happens when it actually happens? Because as of right now, you go to the majority of contact center environments, even those who are using AI to some degree, and you still have agents who are spending a lot of their time on work we would call mundane or repetitive or simple, whatever adjective you want to use. And so really, we have to start to think about, well, as AI gets more advanced, as companies better understand that, and as the demands of our customers evolve, where we know there is going to be a segment of our customer base that is looking for that personalized and unique and directly supportive care that's not just reading a script, we know that we're getting into a point where we have to prepare. And so naturally, companies are starting to look at ways of preparing for that. And the number one way, of course, was training existing employees to handle more complex interactions. So oftentimes when we spout that cliche about simple for AI, complex for humans, we forget that if we've for decades conditioned our contact center agents to focus on our return policy is 90 days, your bill is due on the 15th. Yes, I can give you a free month if you don't cancel your cable. That's not really preparing them for what happens when customers are going to ask tricky questions or say, I don't care what the policy says, I want this. And so actually training them not only for the complex interactions they may have to handle where they have to demonstrate expertise or they have to demonstrate quick thinking, but also heated interactions where they've spent a lot of time in the bot's not giving them what they want. They're now angry. And as an agent, you can't be someone who isn't able to respond to that escalated emotion. You have to really be able to connect with them. That's a priority as well. Other focuses are this idea of training employees for analytical or programmatic work. So we've often heard a phrase like, they're not going to be answering the questions the bot's going to be answering. They're going to be tuning the bot to be better. Again, that sounds awesome. And I know low code makes that really possible, but it's still a stretch to go from reading a script to now thinking about logic trees and conversation flows and putting them together in the right way. So there is training required there as well. Now, this sort of directly gets into our audience members' question, which is, the number 3 focus is actually recruiting employees who are already capable of this higher value work. So not saying, okay, we've hired agents to read a script, now we want them to do more, but instead saying we're hiring people who can do more, and we're redesigning what the contact center agent role looks like to be able to attract that kind of person. Now, certainly when you take into account flexible work models, so people can work from anywhere, they can work flexible hours, they can work part-time due to a gig structure, and then you couple that with a better job description, a better focus of what that role means, and a better career path for that agent. You put those together, it does give you a better chance of attracting that talent. And I can't stress that enough because, as much as we talk about how the agent's playing a bigger role and that, employees are the face of our company, too often we still approach it as a very disposable, expendable, we're going to pay a small amount and whoever sits in that seat is going to be effective. And instead, you really want to look at perhaps we do shrink a percentage of our workforce, but we do elevate what they're working on and make the agent role more of a strategic partnership, a bigger part of the company. That is a commitment that comes down to not just job description, not just catchy buzzwords, but instead really reevaluating exactly what they mean within the business. And then the last one kind of speaks to a theme that we've been talking about throughout the event. The number 4 priority is collaborating with IT so that they can better support AI solutions. So we've been talking a lot about how there's a disconnect between what we know we need on the front lines and what our IT department or our executives are thinking about our technology. And this is a way to, by emphasizing collaboration, even if the technology is supposed to be self-service, it's supposed to be, very easy to use out of the box. Even if you have an amazing vendor partner who can make it simple for you, you're still going to have questions and challenges, and you want to make sure that your IT team is ready to support that vision. And again, when you get to that point where they can support a vision as opposed to answering the same my monitor's not working, or I'm Brooke Lynch, my camera's not working question. I think when you can start to support that kind of stuff, you can actually start to have a more meaningful impact on the experience. And that's when, going back to my very first point, you design technology for a purpose, not just for a potentially exciting new feature down the road.
Yes, I agree. And I want to kind of shout out some of the people in the chat because everyone's been making some very great points. So, so we have Maxime said hiring is already a challenge lately with the pandemic and staff shortages. However, training and creates a synergy on a remote basis. It's hard in our call center. And she said it's hard for agents to feel attached to the company, which is actually a really interesting response. And I think that also touches back on how we talked about the employee experience and making them more a part of this customer-centric appeal. But we
I think I love that point, Brooke, and I just want to jump in real quickly. I know we're kind of coming up against the time, but I think the idea is also rethinking what being part of the company means, because a lot of times it really was, I love my coworkers, I love the stuff we do in the office. It was very, even though it was meaningful and it was like what made us happy to go to work every day, it was ultimately superficial in the grand scheme of things, because if it doesn't hold up when you're not in the same location together, when you're not having a conversation over a beer on Fridays, when you're not seeing everyone face to face, then I would argue that the investment wasn't quite there. And so what you really want to figure out is, what actually makes people feel part of a company in today's era. It may not be, people I think are increasingly moving on from it is, I love the people, I love going in every day, I love just the rapport in the office. It might be, oh, I like getting to work on this task, or I like getting to train this person, or I like getting to solve this problem. The way people define feeling part of the company is changing because the way they think about work in comparison to their everyday life is changing as well in the remote world. So I agree that absolutely we need to make people feel part of the company, especially when they're remote, they're part-time. But what I think is really important to focus on is, what is that sense of attachment, that sense of investment now? Because it may be something that is a little bit more work oriented and a little bit more numbers or outcome oriented than perhaps it was when we were in the workplace, when it was just everyone loves each other here. So of course you're not going to quit.
Yeah, I want to finish off our discussion because we have 5 minutes left by touching on some contact center trends, because that's always something we want to talk about here. So we're aware of the rise of remote work, the evolving needs of customers, and the demand for omni-channel experiences. But when we asked companies how prepared they were for these realities, many didn't seem as secure. So only 52% of companies said they feel very prepared to handle remote work, which is very surprising because we've been doing remote work for the past 2 years. And only 16% felt very prepared to deliver an omni-channel experience. So how can companies better prepare themselves to remain competitive in the customer experience environment? And what role should technology play in this preparation?
So it's funny, Brooke. Normally I would say I'm the more pessimistic or glass half empty of the two of us. But in this case, when I actually covered those stats, I saw them as much more encouraging than I think your question is, because I saw that if 52% are very prepared to handle remote work, with what we know about how disconnected and fragmented our contact center platforms tend to be, I do consider that a positive step. Of course, we want to be at 100%. And of course, with the stakes of the customer experience, 52% is still a failing grade. But I do think that's a sign that we have gotten a little bit more confident in the technology that we have. And that's a sign that companies are moving in the right direction. Really, what you want to figure out is, the big takeaway, and I've heard this from some people, and I love this point, is that ultimately what the pandemic has done, what the rise of remote work has done, is it's exposed just how serious any breaks in our technology structure were. It's exposed just how much those fragments matter. So you take the idea of not having knowledge centralized. When you're in the office, you have people to talk to. You can say, what exactly is our policy when they wore their jeans? Do we still take them back? Well, if you're knowledge based, hopefully it says it. But if it didn't, you could always ask someone who was on the floor, hey, what do I say here? Now, if you don't have that person dialed up, if you don't want to juggle your Teams or Slack chat on your phone while you're also talking to a customer, it could get a little bit trickier. And so it really speaks to having that knowledge centralized. Same with collaboration, right? I kind of alluded to this in my previous answer, but we often mistook saying hello to people or being physically in connection with people as we're working together. Well, now that we don't have that forced kind of socialization, we're really testing how collaborative we really are. Is your first instinct, wow, I have a great idea, let me share this with my boss or with my peers? Or is it, well, yeah, it was a nice thing to talk about when I would see them every day, but now maybe I'll share it at the bi-weekly meeting or something. And you do lose a lot of that connection as well. So if you don't have tools in place and processes in place to get the right feedback, get the right collaboration, that you might have been able to overcome that when you're all on site together, but you don't overcome that in the remote world. And then, of course, and you brought the stat up as well, channels are one of the most obvious examples, right? Because we went from, as much as omni-channel has been a buzzword for a decade, we know that up until 2020, it was very much an addition, an extra credit exercise for a lot of companies out there. When we got to the point where they couldn't keep up with their call volume, customers needed to interact via digital channels, and they had urgency and they had real questions that they were still asking over chat. And we realized that our chat wasn't even capable of doing this, but even if it was sort of capable, they had trouble moving to another channel if they needed to escalate. We really got a front row seat to how crippling that could be, because now we were so reliant on these channels to work, to be connected to the overall experience. So, and I can go on and on with different examples, but you get the point here, which is the number one takeaway is, again, there's no shortcuts. There's no covering for your flaws or your gaps. Right now, if you don't have everything connected, it's going to manifest as a bad experience, both for your agents and your customers, and that's going to have a deleterious impact on your business.
Great points, as always, Brian. I want to thank everyone for joining us to kick off the State of Contact Center Technology event. You can check out our complete market study in the sponsor content hub. And as we mentioned, be sure to continue asking questions throughout the event to build up those points, and hopefully you will win the $100 Amazon gift card. And to learn more, you can connect with us on LinkedIn for additional insight and content. We love to hear from you all. And up next, I will be speaking with Jay Gupta from TalkDesk about emulating big brand experiences without the headache. So please join us.